Good morning. The next part of the story of my life that I would like to talk about is the very last few weeks and months that we experienced in Loma Linda back in 1975. On June 15, 1975, my sister Meredith was born. I was thinking about my mom and how strong and brave she was during that time. She was pregnant and she was ready to have her baby. At the same time, my dad was finishing dental school and they were packing up their house and getting ready to move to their next experience. And once again, shortly after my sister was born, probably within a month, my parents were on the road with their entire house moving up to Washington State. So they certainly didn't worry about placing all their experiences together and moving forward. So my mother was pregnant with my sister, and everything had gone well, except that she was always very nauseated and sick during the whole pregnancy, both for me and my sister. And so she decided not to have any more children just because of how difficult it was on her body. And so after she was 9 months pregnant with my sister, she was going to have my sister in Loma Linda University Hospital. Now, the interesting thing is that I gave birth to both my sons at Loma Linda University Hospital. So there's a very strong connection there. The same hospital. Anyway, it was a very different time in 75. In fact, after my sister was born and my mother was coming down, it was the first time that myself, at 3 years old, was meeting my sister. And I had been told many times that I couldn't hold my sister without sitting down. And so as my parents walked out of the hospital and nurses were walking out my mom in a wheelchair with my sister, and my dad and I were going to meet her, I turned to my mom and dad and said, I want to hold my sister. And so I sat down on the floor and I insisted on holding her before we left and went home. And that is the level of love and care that we always had for each other. There may have been moments where we were teenagers and we exhibited that on the outside, but our souls are and were very close. So after Meredith and I met, that beautiful, magical moment, we got in the car, went home, and as I said before, my parents finished packing up the house, got everything ready to go, and we moved up to Washington State, to a small town called Chehalis. And I feel that it was a very inspirational experience that we had. So my dad had worked for his aunt in the summers And she actually, I think she had cows, and he milked the cows. Anyway, something like that. And so he had worked for his Aunt Gladys in the summers when he was a kid. And she lived there in Centralia and Chehalis area in that valley. It's kind of like twin cities, Chehalis and Centralia, in the twin cities of the valley. And so my dad had experienced that enough to know that he really, really liked that area of the country and would like to live there. At the same time, Dr. Steck, one of the doctors there in Chehalis, decided to start a medical clinic and bring a whole bunch of people from the same church that my parents were in to that clinic. So my dad came as the dentist, and he was the dentist at the clinic. And a whole bunch of doctors came to the clinic to work there. So it turned out that I was raised in a church that was primarily filled with doctors and dentists and lawyers and other professionals. So it was a very unique experience, very unusual experience. In a very small town, to have that level of education. It's interesting. I just realized that my children right now are going to school and living in Los Alamos, another small town with a very high level of education. Okay, well, I guess our lives do a lot of parallels. So here we are, moving up to the small town of Chehalis. And my dad began working at Steck Clinic. And I want to talk more about the people that I met who worked there. But today I'd like to talk about one more thing, which is the first place we moved. So when we very first moved to Chehalis, we moved to a trailer that was a rental. So I don't know, my dad found somebody that he knew or something that had a trailer for rent. And so for a very short period of time, we lived in a trailer. I don't think it was a trailer park. It's my first memory, my actual memory, is living in that trailer there in Chehalis. And one of my favorite things to do was to go out into the gravel driveway and sit in the gravel driveway. And someone had poured out a fish tank, and there were a bunch of, the stones inside a fish tank that are like colored. These were colored pink. And so I would go out into the gravel and I would pick out all the pink fish tank stones and separate them from the other rocks in the gravel driveway. That is my first recollection of enjoying stones and rocks and being outside in nature, sitting in the gravel and picking out the pretty rocks. And that has been and always will be a big part of my life, collecting stones. So we're going to end that. We had the big move from Loma Linda up to Chehalis. We had the big move, and we had the big happenings in our lives. And my beautiful sister was brought into my life. So grateful that I was not an only child. More later.